The North Must Remember, the Mad Queen video. So some of you may have already watched my previous work, The North Must Remember Season 8 Rewrite. I had a challenge on Reddit from a commenter who said basically Dan and Dave did the best they could for the last minute plot twist with Daenerys turning into the Mad Queen. And the fact that they did it in 6 episodes was actually an accomplishment. So I got to thinking a little bit about, could I do any better? If I limited myself to 6 episodes, could I make the Daenerys turning into the Mad Queen more acceptable? So I wrote down a few ideas, and I thought I'd share them with you guys today. So again, I'm limiting myself to 6 episodes and trying to do a little bit better when it comes to Dany's last-minute turn. But one of the things I will allow myself to do is go back and change a couple things from Season 5 and Season 7, so I thought I'd share that with you guys today. So if we go back to Season 5, the Hardhome episode, Jon's going to retrieve the Dragonglass satchel prior to his duel with the White Walker, and all other events remain the same. So Jon was able to bring that satchel with the horn and the Dragonglass back to the wall. Season 7, skipping ahead, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall, largely remains the same. The Night King flings his spear at Viserion, but he misses. Jon still falls under the ice and loses the Dragonglass satchel at the bottom of the lake. Dany then leaves on Drogon with the surviving men and a single white. Jon is then pulled from the bottom of the lake by Uncle Benjen, and when they resurface, they draw swords and are surrounded by whites. They exchange looks of doubt, but fire then destroys all the whites from above. Rhaegal lands beside Jon. Benjen grins at Jon and tells him to get on your dragon, kind of insinuating that Benjen knows of Jon's heritage. Jon surprisingly complies, and Rhaegal agrees. Jon mounts him and pleads with Benjen to accompany him. Benjen simply replies, "I cannot go where you are headed. Rally the Southern Kingdoms, nephew. Tell them winter is here." Jon then flies off and sees Benjen get overwhelmed by whites. Jon returns to the wall, and Dany agrees to help the North. Dany then sees Jon commanding Rhaegal and is intrigued. She decides to feign love for him, and Jon then bends the knee to her. Dany then has a new scene where she orders Varys to look into Jon's past. Dany does have feelings for Jon, but she starts to see him as a bit of a rival. There's then a new White Walker scene. Rather than raising Viserion, the White Walkers retrieve Jon's Dragonglass from the lake bottom and offers it to the Night King. Moving ahead to Episode 7 of Season 7, Dragon and the Wolf, Jon suggests they both arrive for their meeting riding dragons. Daenerys rejects this idea and becomes territorial over her dragons. Jon apologizes for his forwardness, but he doesn't press the issue. Dany kind of handles the issue a little immaturely and loses her composure. Sounds a bit bratty, if you will. Dany and Jon still get together, more so because she wants control of him, though Jon's feelings for her seem genuine. The Army of the Dead, White Walkers, and Night King arrive at the wall. The Night King brings down the wall utilizing the Horn of Winter, and then we end Episode 7 with them proceeding past the wall. Now moving on to Season 8, Winterfell. Sam and Bran have their conversation regarding Jon's lineage. We add a scene that after the king's arrival and introductions, Varys then corners Bran and seeks information regarding Jon's path. Bran asks Varys, "Do you remember the advice you gave my father?" Varys replies, "I counseled the hand of the king on a great many issues. My father died for the same reason his predecessor did," said Bran. "He started asking questions," said Bran, quoting a past Varys. Varys took this as a very stern warning, which just increased his curiosity. Varys is present when Daenerys approaches Sam, and Sam learns of his father and brother's death. Yeah, it's kind of silly, but I went with it. Sam still reveals Jon's lineage in the crypts and is overheard by Varys, who was listening in on the conversation. Season 8, Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Jaime's trial goes very much the same way, as disgusting as it may be, Dany's disgust is even more evident. I'm not going to correct the battle strategies or anything like that, it is what it is. We wind up adding a scene where Varys confides in Tyrion about Jon's lineage. They decide to keep that information secret from everyone else, including Daenerys, until after the battle. Tyrion then reluctantly agrees. Move on to Episode 3, The Long Night. The battle begins very much the same. The Dothraki charge, independent from orders. Dany leads a direct assault on the army of the dead after the Dothraki charge. The Night King then spares Viserion, and his body impacts the ground at a distance. The rest of the battle unravels very much the same. Dany is more hesitant of attacking due to the death of Viserion. She hovers above a resurrected Viserion, who winds up attacking Dany in midair, and the dragon fight occurs very much the same. Jon and the Night King fall to the ground, Dany firebombs the Night King, Rhaegal and Viserion continue fighting without riders. Dany retreats as the Night King attempts to spear Drogon. Jon and the Night King are now on the ground alone. Jon sprints towards the Night King very much like the show, and Jon unsheaths Longclaw and sees Ghost sprinting towards the Night King, approaching from a different angle. The Night King turns to face Jon, and Ghost reaches the Night King first. Ghost leaps, and the Night King catches the direwolf in midair. Ghost then yelps and drops to the ground, lifeless. Jon stops in his track, mortified to see the Night King raise Ghost from the dead, but all the bodies surrounding Jon also rise to their feet. The Night King turns to proceed away from Jon and Ghost, with Ghost at his side. Jon attempts to fight his way through the Whites, and Jon is then assisted by returning Dany on Drogon. Jon then proceeds back to the Godswood as Dany lands Drogon outside the castle walls. At the base of the wall, beyond the trench fire, Dany sees Podrick and Jaime Lannister fighting Whites off. Drogon stands tall over the trench. Jaime smiles as he thinks Daenerys is going to assist them. Daenerys then whispers, and Drogon reduces Jaime Lannister to ash, as well as Podrick Payne. Daenerys then takes to the sky, not noticing Arya alone on the battlements, as she had just witnessed her execution of Jaime Lannister. The Night King enters the Godswood, kills Theon, is confronted by Jon. Bran then wargs into Ghost and attacks the Night King, giving Jon the edge he needs to eventually kill the Night King. All walkers, Whites, Viserion, and Ghost all fall over dead. End episode 3. So episode 4, The Last of the Starks, we have the funeral scene and the victory feast. Dany legitimizes Gendry. Arya is conflicted and is upset with Gendry for accepting anything from Daenerys and refuses his marriage proposal. So at this point, Arya knows exactly what Daenerys is. Doesn't see her for being a queen, but a rabid murderer. We have a war council scene. Arya is quiet and avoids Jon and Daenerys' eyes. Viserion and Ghost are dead. Drogon and Rhaegal survive the long night and will fly cover over the armies as they march south. Arya then asks to speak with Jon in private. They can argue about Daenerys. Jon reveals his lineage. Arya reveals Daenerys' murder of Jaime and Podrick, but Jon refuses to acknowledge it, even when confirmed by Bran. The sisters exit extremely frustrated with Jon. Kind of think this makes sense because Jon, unfortunately, even though he's the hero of the story, is quite naive. And when he's confronted with this information, he doesn't know what else to do with it other than just ignore it, deny it. She my queen. So I thought this kind of made sense. Sansa then finds Tyrion, and Brienne informs them of Dany's murderous actions. Both of these people would be very upset. Brienne because she had a bit of a thing for Jaime, and then, of course, Tyrion is Jaime's brother. Tyrion is absolutely mortified, but Brienne kind of holds her composure. Tyrion then warns Brienne not to take any hasty action, and Brienne swears on her honor. Brienne then seeks out Varys and Arya. So we got a little bit of a coup starting. Dany and Jorah are in her chambers discussing the King's Landing attack. Brienne then enters and tells Jorah that they found Lyanna's body, and they're waiting for him in the courtyard. Jorah receives permission from Dany to be excused from their meeting. Brienne then asks Dany to call in her guards from the passageway. 2 Unsullied enter, and Brienne quickly executes them. Daenerys is mortified and feels a great amount of fear as Brienne turns to Dany, blood still staining her sword. This sword was given to me by Sir Jaime, whom you murdered. It's the same sword that beheaded Stannis Baratheon for the unjust murder of his kin. A crown won't spare you from righteous justice. Fire may not kill a dragon, but I'd be curious to see if my steel could, as she points her sword and touches the straight-backed Daenerys' chest. Daenerys' face twists as she closes her eyes and calls on Drogon. As she ponders these thoughts, the shutters covering the windows are slammed shut and barred from the outside. Daenerys now knows that Brienne was not acting alone. Brienne announced her formal arrest of the Queen as she exited the chambers to stand guard. If you guys remember, this is one of the reasons why the Mad King eventually lost his mind, because he was kidnapped and imprisoned for quite a few months before being rescued by Sir Barristan. Varys then enters and explains Daenerys' situation to her, that she's being overthrown and tried for various crimes. Dany asks if Jon is involved, to which Varys lies and says of course. Varys then informs Daenerys of Jon's lineage, and of Varys' plan to install him as the Dragon King. Jon intends to lead Rhaegal and the army to King's Landing, and Daenerys is to be executed along Drogon for the murder of Jaime, Podrick, and the Tarlys. Daenerys starts rambling incoherently as Varys leaves her. Daenerys reminds him that she will, or intends, to burn him alive for his treachery. Jorah then returns to the passageway outside of the Queen's chambers and is confronted by Brienne. A handful of wildlings had already approached Brienne as she stands with her sword in hand, so the wildlings are taking the side of Brienne at this point. They affirm they were sent by Tormund. Jorah returns to the Queen's hallway to see her change of guard, along with a handful of Unsullied. The Unsullied battle the Norsemen, and Ser Jorah engages Brienne just outside of Daenerys' chambers. Brienne then slays Ser Jorah reluctantly, as the wildlings and Unsullied are evenly matched. Grey Worm arrives and orders the Unsullied to stand down as he challenges Lady Brienne. Grey Worm ultimately defeats Lady Brienne and frees Daenerys. Daenerys orders Lady Brienne, even though she's defeated, she didn't actually die. Daenerys orders Lady Brienne's tongue removed as she fears Brienne spreading the rumor of Jon's lineage. Daenerys then later executes Brienne via Drogon after conversations with Jon and Tyrion. Jon and Tyrion speak in her defense, but eventually Daenerys decides to disagree, and she grows more unhinged and paranoid. Jon starts to doubt his own loyalty to Dany, as encouraged by Sansa and Arya. So as you see, even though they won the Long Night, they defeated the Night King and the Army of the Dead, there's a lot of dissension in Daenerys' camp. She's not sure who she can trust and who she can't. But the people who are plotting against her are plotting kind of for good reason. But it's kind of a complicated situation because we expected Daenerys to harbor some vengeance towards Jaime. And it kind of robs the audience of, the ending of Jaime's arc. It ends so suddenly, we don't get to see him fulfill the Valonqar or anything else like that. So the audience kind of takes out that frustration on Daenerys, right? So they're going to wind up judging her quite harshly, even though her actions are quite reasonable, right? She took vengeance on the man who killed her father. So it makes sense from Daenerys' point of view, but I don't think the audience is going to sympathize with her at all. So the audience has already started kind of judging Daenerys a little more harshly, and they see her acting out of character. We can't just have it when she's on Dragonback over King's Landing, then decide to change character. It doesn't fit with the story, doesn't fit with the narrative. Alright, so moving on, Episode 5, The Bells. Jon and Dany fly towards King's Landing and plan the invasion. The armies arrive outside of King's Landing. Tyrion approaches Arya and the Hound. He encourages the pair of them to infiltrate the Red Keep and discuss the opportunity of the Hound to engage his brother. Likely, he is going to be agreeable. The Hound will relay to Cersei that Tyrion will be waiting under the Red Keep to smuggle her to Essos and escape Dany's wrath. So Tyrion is fully betraying Daenerys. Dany, Drogon, and Jon Rhaegal then attack the defensive positions at King's Landing from the air, as well as the army of the Golden Company. The Hound approaches Cersei and part of her Kingsguard as she attempts to evacuate the Red Keep. Sandor relays Tyrion's message regarding her evacuation to Essos and allows Cersei to pass. Clegane Bowl then continues as it does in the show. Daenerys goes overboard and moves from defensive targets to civilian positions. Jon then lands on the battlements and refuses to take any further part in the burning of King's Landing. Cersei meets with Tyrion in the bowels of the Red Keep, and once Tyrion reveals his plan for escape, Cersei, unexpectedly, attacks Tyrion and attempts to strangle him. Tyrion overpowers her and eventually does strangle her, fulfilling the Valonqar prophecy. Tyrion does this out of a certain amount of reluctance, but he kind of acts in self-defense at this point. Once he stands up, realizes what he's done, Arya emerges from the shadows with a bow, to Tyrion's surprise. She admits that she was waiting for Cersei to betray Tyrion, and was ready to murder her in Tyrion's defense if needed be. Tyrion then pleads with Arya to kill Dany. Alright, episode 6. The burning of King's Landing is complete. Dany gives her speech to her armies. Tyrion then approaches her, critical of her actions. Tyrion reveals that he was the one that killed Cersei, and Daenerys accuses him of treason. Grey Worm then arrests him immediately. Daenerys turns to Jon, daring him to object. Jon is careful to avoid her eye. The reason she wound up arresting Tyrion isn't necessarily just because of him complaining about her burning King's Landing, but she views Tyrion killing Cersei, robbing Daenerys of that opportunity. She considers that treasonous. So she is full-on unhinged at this point. Jon is then approached by Arya, reminding him that she was just as unhinged before the raising of King's Landing. Jon then visits Tyrion, and their conversation is very much the same as the show. Jon visits Daenerys in the throne room, and again the conversation goes the same way. Jon kisses her as he pulls his knife. Except this time, Daenerys notices his insincerity. She withdraws from him slowly, and an expression of shock is riddled across her face, and a guilt-laden expression is evident on Jon's. Jon could not bring himself to murder Daenerys, but she knew that was his intention. Jon refuses to pursue her, and he can hear Drogon's wings flapping outside the throne room. Daenerys, still in shock at Jon's betrayal, utters only a single word: Dracarys. But the last word she never finishes, due to an arrow protruding out of her throat. Jon catches her as she falls. He looks up in the gallery to see Arya still holding a bow. Daenerys dies in Jon's arms, very similar to Ygritte. Arya joins Jon on the ground level as Grey Worm and a handful of Unsullied enter the throne room. Grey Worm immediately orders Jon and Arya to be executed in Daenerys' name. Jon, however, does not recognize his authority, as Daenerys is now dead. Arya is willing to submit to arrest, although Jon eventually cuts down the Unsullied closest to her. Grey Worm grins and enters the melee. Grey Worm eventually spears Jon through his upper leg, and as he approaches a captured Arya, an Unsullied soldier lifts her off the ground with the spear held underneath her chin. Grey Worm pulls a dagger and holds it to her throat as he sentences her to death. Jon painfully rises with a spear protruding out of his leg and orders the Unsullied to stand down. Grey Worm refuses. Jon then reluctantly proclaims himself King of the Seven Kingdoms and the heir to House Targaryen, to whom the Unsullied are sworn to. Grey Worm reluctantly obliges and decides to arrest Arya as ordered by Jon, to later stand trial. Arya volunteers for a trial by combat and is awaiting the gathering, and is joined in the Black Cells by Jaqen H'ghar. And you don't really find out why he's there or what he plans to do. It's you're kind of in the dark a little bit. The door opens. Arya squints, and the hooded man reveals to be her former, I don't want to say master, but her former teacher, I guess we could say. Arya is then brought forward and submits to the trial by combat, and she asks for no champion. Grey Worm then volunteers as Daenerys' champion. Jon had no authority to intervene and watches intently as the trial unfolds. Surprisingly to the audience, Grey Worm eventually spears Arya through the belly and kills her at the foot of the Iron Throne, and Jon is completely deflated. Jon's only act as king was to judge Arya as guilty before gods and men. Then we'll break from the scene. We'll kind of have closings for each character, roll credits, and then at the end you get maybe a post-credit scene that sees the waif living as a peasant in Winterstown. One night before climbing onto a straw bed, the waif briefly pulls her face off to reveal Arya healthy, whole, and pregnant with Gendry's child. She will live the rest of her life as a peasant outside of Winterfell, as not to impugn the reign of her cousin, Jon Snow. She tells no one, although once Bran made long eye contact with her years later. And I think this works. It's a good way to show a progressive insanity kind of overtaking Daenerys, and I would think more of the audience would side with her because of the murder of Jaime and then her attempted murder of Jon, even though the one with Jon is kind of an act of self-defense. And then it kind of echoes, Jon once again, holding someone as they die in his arms. It still gives a little bit of a nod to Arya doing something specific rather than killing the Night King, like everyone wanted Jon to be able to do it. It turns out she was the one that killed Daenerys. So I thought that kind of just made sense. So hopefully, guys, you enjoyed this brief take. Like I said, Season 9, Blood of Kings, is currently being written. I may be releasing a prologue chapter here soon, as well as a brief explanation, kind of a character breakdown for all the new characters that are going to be seen in Season 9. So be on the lookout for that. Again, I hope you guys are enjoying House of the Dragon as much as I am. The good news is the canon from House of the Dragon has not yet kind of conflicted with what I'm writing for Season 9. I definitely don't want those two to I want them to coincide. I don't want them to break each other's canon at all. So, good news is my ideas thus far are working, and hopefully they don't get interrupted too bad. But I think we're moving on to episode 3 of House of the Dragon here tomorrow night, and I'll probably enjoy it as much as you guys do. But either way, thanks for listening, and be on the lookout for our future Season 9. Hopefully I'll have it out in the next couple months. See you later.